So, okay, so I think we will start now. Hi everyone. I would like to thank all of audience and participant or anyone who attended to this session. This session will be about the digital rights in North Africa. We have many experience, not many experience. We have some experience from the countries in the region. Uh, we have Miss Aya Higazi, the Egyptian lawyer, and she will cover the situation and give us an overview about the situation of digital rights in Egypt. And also we have Miss Yusuf Jouini. Miss Yusuf Jouini also will cover the situation in Tunisia and Morocco. So we have three countries now. Also, we have another case of Sudan. So I will cover the Sudan 2 minutes. Just announcements. It's supposed that Miss Abrar Ali from Sudan is a researcher from Sudan. She should cover the situation in Sudan, but unfortunately she had emergency last time and she forced to travel from country to others. So unfortunately she will not attend today. But I also will give the overview in few minutes about the situation in Sudan. So let us start. Just I will give you an overview about the situation in the North Africa without like point out in the specific countries because I will leave this issue to our panelists. So the situation in North Africa has changed after 2010 or what's called the Arab Spring and the revolution that happened in started in Tunisia and come to Egypt and after that for the other countries. Since these events happen in the region, the Arab countries or the countries in the North Africa started to adopting legal texts to surprise the digital rights. Of course, the case of Tunisia is somehow it's not it's different because they have a legal text and cybercrime law since 2009. But what happened after 2008? Egypt started to adopting legal tools and legislation uh, to not regulate. They call that to regulate the activities in the online, but it's near to or to close to attempt to close the civic space in Egypt. Is not for regulation or to control the activities online. Of course, most of the countries in the North Africa claim that they are adopting this legislation to fight the terrorist actions in the region. But after that, the experience and the practice that tell us the main issue of adopting this legal not to fight the terrorism, but to fight the human rights online. After in 2018, Egypt has adopted the first law is about the cybercrime, and Ms. Aya will be give us more details about this law, and also in 2000 in the same year, the Egypt also has adopted another legislation about the media, and also we have in 2020 we have a law related to the data protection. I think Ms. Aya will cover all of these issues. And also all the countries now has trained to surveillance or have the legal tools to enable them to surveillance the activities online. Uh, Also in the terms of the freedom in general, not digital freedom in the region only, the country it's like classified as a free is the Tunisia. Is according to the Freedom House is the only country in the region is completely free. I think the situation has changed. I think Monsieur will give us more details about this. And we have Morocco and Mauritania. They classified as partially free. But other countries like Algeria, Egypt, Libya, and Sudan is not free. Uh, uh, in terms of the digital, and also after the events in 2010, our Arab Spring, as some called, uh, the number of the people in the region who use the internet and they try to or start to using the different social media platforms is increased uh, uh, in compared before 2010. In terms of the internet freedom, also we have only, uh, as I mentioned, that Tunisia is the only country is classified as free, but in terms of internet freedom, Tunis is not free. So now the situation in the region, we don't have any country from between among the 7 countries in the North Africa is classified as free in terms of internet freedom. That means that all these countries have taken measures and legal procedures to close the civic space physically and also online. Uh, in terms of legislation, we have 4 countries has legal or law cybercrime laws, and as I mentioned in the beginning, the aim of from the studies and the researchers, the aim of these laws not to regulate the activities online, but to close the civic space.
L'objectif de
We
ces lois n'est pas de...
So we have Algeria, Egypt, Mauritania, and Sudan. These 4 countries have a legal or cybercrime laws. Egypt has data protection. Tunisia has a data protection law. Morocco also has, and Morocco I think has a data protection law. This is an overview about the situation in general in the data in the North Africa. Of course, also in terms of the blocking website about the internet shutdown, I think the most of the countries in this region witnesses an incident of shutdown. For example, in 2019, there is 6 incident in Algeria. International down in Algeria has existed, and also 1 in Egypt, and 2 in Sudan, and 1 in Mauritania, Libya, Tunisia, Morocco. During 2019, didn't see any shutdown internet. This is the overview about the situation in the North Africa. Now we will move to go or do diving in these cases we will try to cover today. So we will start, as I mentioned, by Egypt, and we have Miss Aya Higazi. Miss Aya Higazi is an Egyptian American human rights defender, and she holds a master's degree in public administration from Harvard Kennedy School and certificates in MLD and child protection. She has studied in law in Egypt and conflict analysis and resolution in George Mason University. During the Arab Spring, she returned to Egypt, where she established an NGO. This NGO is Bloody. And by the way, this session is organized, jointly organized between Bloody and ADRIN. ADRIN is African Digital Rights Network. I think Ms. Ayek can give few information about Bloody, but about the ADRIN, or this network is this new established last year, and it's composed from different human rights actors in the Africa and researchers, and the network work mainly in the academic work. It's over to you, Ms. Aya.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Just a brief overview of Biladi. We are a nonprofit that was established in DC and has branches in Egypt and Tunisia, and we focus on human rights with a particular focus on women and children. So today I will give you a presentation over Egypt's anti-cybercrime law and the impact on public freedoms. It is Egyptian law number 175, which is called the Anti-Cyber and Information Technology Crimes Law. And it was ratified on August 14, 2018. The law classifies IT and cyber crimes, presents definitions and material elements of the crimes that fall under this classification, and specifies the punishment and criminal responsibility of convicted individuals. In simple terms, the law provides new authority for online surveillance, blocking of websites, and monitoring of internet users, and the use of communication services in Egypt. This is the definition by Access Now. The law was purportedly created to protect national security, but in reality, it's used to legitimize crackdowns of freedom of speech and privacy that were already widely practiced in the Egyptian government. The law deliberately employs vague and broad legal justifications to blur the difference between the legal tracking of those who practice fraudulent or extremist activities online and of those who circulate news, information, and views on political matters. The law defines national security as all that relates to the independence, stability, and security, unity, and territorial integrity of the homeland, including those that are not defined, such as endangering the security of the country and its national economy. As mentioned in Article 7 of the law, this broadness of the law contributes to the creation of an environment of fear that compels Egyptian citizens to abandon their rights to freedom of expression and represents a systematic threat to Egyptian journalists and regular citizens. The law contains 45 articles, and four provisions exceptionally stand out. There's Article 2, which requires telecommunication companies to retain and store users' data for 180 days in order to assist the authorities in identifying users, metadata, and computer IP addresses. There's Article 7, which grants the investigative authorities the power to block any website whenever they deem that the website's content promotes extremist ideas that violate national security or damage the Egyptian economy. Article 14, it states that individuals will gain access to or hack a website or private accounts or prohibited information system, and here, whether intentionally or unintentionally, may be penalized with imprisonment of no less than a year and or a fine of Egyptian pounds 50,000 to 100,000, which is like between $3,000 and $500. And then there's Article 25, which states that posting content that violates family principles and values upheld by Egyptian society may be punished by a minimum of 6 months imprisonment and or a fine of 50,000 Egyptian pounds to 100,000. And the most prominent case that happens is the persecution of the TikTok girls. So there are more than 500 websites, primarily ones related to media, politics, and human rights, that have been blocked as a result of Article 7 of this law. Authorities have censored and blocked online content in many websites without a transparent process, making it difficult for defendants to understand the reason for such procedures taken against them. Even visiting a banned website is now punishable by up to a year in prison, while those who create or manage a website that is subsequently banned could be sentenced to 2 years in prison. As of year-end 2020, the list of blocked websites include approximately 116 media and press websites, 394 VPN and proxy service providers, 15 human rights websites, 11 cultural websites, 17 chatting websites, and 27 political opposition websites, 8 blogs and blog hosts, and 12 multimedia sharing websites, and others, of course. The monitoring group NetBlocks found that more than 34,000 websites were blocked ahead of the April 2019 constitutional referendum, of course, so that people wouldn't know, in an apparent bid to suppress opposition to the amendments, which were adopted as a result of a deeply flawed process. Meaningful political opposition is virtually non-existent, as expression of dissent can draw criminal prosecution and imprisonment. Ranked 161, it's 161st, how do you say that? Out of 180 countries in the Reporters Sans Frontiers 28th World Press Freedom Index, Egypt currently is one of the world's biggest jailers of journalists, with at least 36 professional and non-professional journalists detained in connection with the provision of news information. Freedom House gave Egypt a score of 26 out of 100 in terms of internet freedom for year 2020, with 100 being the optimal. This low score is a result of significant violations of user rights, limits on content, and obstacles to access. Law 175 affects all Egyptians, whether they're casual internet users, journalists, or IT professionals. Blocking websites is a violation of citizens' rights for access to information and freedom of expression. The Egyptian government's continued effort to block websites and restrict access to information online are a clear violation of human rights standards. Mainly, paragraph 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the ICCPR, that Egypt has ratified. Article 2 of this law appears to violate the provision of Article 57 of the Egyptian Constitution itself, which prohibits the monitoring of means of communication without a specific judicial order and without a specified period of time. The language used in Law 175 seems to be intentionally vague, so as to allow Egyptian government to subjectively apply the censorship in the name of national security. According to an official at Reporters Without Borders, this law just legalizes the internet censorship that is already practiced in Egypt. In the name of national security, which is defined very broadly and vaguely, the authorities have assumed the right to censor news sites or NGOs whose only crime is reporting human rights violations by the state. Law 175 has increased restriction on freedom of speech in the digital world and exposed internet users and media to the danger of imprisonment to the normal use of means of communications. Thank you.
Thank you, Aya. But I have a question for you about what is the impact of the emergency law on the digital rights in Egypt? If there is some implication of this law, or
yeah, basically, so of course, like the free access to the internet and to internet and to information is largely restricted because these are the more independent and international websites, or independent or international both, that are restricted. And so people do not have that access to information. But even more, there's like a second tier of impact, which is that there's that climate of fear of actually disseminating any information, because not only could the website or the means be blocked, but it can also be subject to imprisonment. And so people now don't want to give the information that they have, or would even like be afraid, as I've mentioned above, like they wouldn't even check a website, because even if you check a banned web or try to check a blocked website, that you can be subject to imprisonment. So basically, Egypt lies in darkness. They have Egyptians, or rather we have a right to be in fear of actually finding the truth about whatever matter. Like sometimes, as I mentioned, also there's cultural websites that are blocked. It's not just like sensitive national security or sensitive politics, human rights, even cultural websites.
also you mentioned something about the definition in the laws. Could you like give us some list about what about the definition? I know that the definition is very vague and there is no any like clear definition, but you can give us more about the definition.
Sure. So like one example is national security. So what is national security? Anything can fall under that, and like harming the economy. So for example, if you want to change the economic system, or if you have a critique, or if you like, for example, criticize the new Suez Canal or the administrative city, are you harming the economy? So any critique, basically of how, like the war in Sinai, so that's obviously national security. for how the U.S. How Egypt spends the U.S. foreign aid that it receives, how Egypt has built an ineffective canal, for example. All of this could theoretically fall under that. And also like the law that said the provision that says family values, that which has in fact been used as a means of repression that targets girls, of course, and women in particular, not men. What are the family values? What are the Egyptian family values? And so like basically if you have a TikTok, if you have a TikTok account and you just use it to express yourself and dance or whatever, that could be a violation of family values. And under who what are family values and who defines them? There isn't even a definition to be found of that anywhere. So how do you know if you're violating them or not? That's the answer. You wouldn't know. So most of these things, like there isn't even, if you want to comply by that law, there's no way that you can ensure that you have complied.
Also, the last question for you: if there is any judicial oversee in place, maybe it's could help to eliminate the rate of abuse.
Oh, sorry. If there's a judicial review in place, that could what?
Yeah.
Oh, there isn't even a judicial review, like, and so also like once these are banned, you don't know who banned them, you don't know who blocked them, you don't know how to appeal, and you don't know why. Even worse.
Thank you. I would like. Sorry. Go ahead, Mr.
Oh, you were just muted. I wanted to tell you that.
Yes, thank you. I would like just to add one thing about what I had mentioned about the situation in Egypt, about the fake news, especially under the pandemic, because most of countries such as Egypt and Algeria started to investigate and to arrest these people who started to post some information about the pandemic and the numbers of infected people, and they accuse them spread the fake news. The problem here, from my point of view, that what is the legal criteria of fake news? What is the fake news, and what is the legal criteria for this fake news? So, and what's the difference between fake news and the right to criticize? Because as a citizen, we have a right to criticize the public policy. We can say that okay, this information is not correct, especially if this information comes from the government officers. But in the practice, in the ground, we have or we see the situation is changed or is not correct or is not matching with the announcement come from the government. So I think this one of issue not related to Egypt only, but also I think it's applying most of the countries in the region. For example, Alexandria also had this practice during the pandemic. But so I think we have to focus more to or to start to research about the legal criteria of fake news and how we can differentiate between the fake news and the right to criticize the public process, because it's very important, because it's not logic if someone has like criticized or okay, so you say that we have this number in the hospitals as infected people, but we know we have our families, our relatives, and we know that the hospitals is full with the person, but and you come and say that okay, we recorded only 20 cases. So I think it's not logic. So I think it's one of the point in the region. Regarding the Sudan, I think the situation in Sudan is not away from the situation in Egypt. And by the way, the Sudan also has adopted the cybercrime law in 2018 as Egypt. And I can say it's not copy paste. It's not copy paste from the Egyptian law, but the Sudanese law gave more acts that subject to criminalize under this law. Also, what's the similar between Sudan and Egypt? As I mentioned about the definition, the problem is definitions. Also, the grounds that give the government the power to track the people and to, subject them to investigation if they like post something or use the website if something harms the national security. So it's the same question: what is the national security? We don't have clear definition. What constitute national security? Also about the family values, we don't have Sudan also the Sudanese laws repeats the same ground that gives the government the right to arrest this person who like abuse the family values. What is the family values? And they added some other actions and acts like if you assault the religious figures and what's the type of this assault if you like mentioned that this person say something is not in the Islam, for example, so that's mean this assault and that's mean this person is subject to uh, uh, or this person may be arrested because he like just criticizes one of the opinions. Also in Sudan we have as Egypt, in Egypt we have the emergency law, and under the emergency law, the government has the right to practice the surveillance, whether physically or online. Also in Sudan, we have a national security law. Also, this national security law gives the power to the police officers to check everything and to get the data from any person in Sudan. So I think the situation in Sudan is not away from the situation in Egypt. We can say it's progressed. Now we will move to Miss Yusuf Jouini to hear from to know more about the situation in Tunisia and Morocco. I think that Tunisia's situation is in Tunisia is somehow is more better than Egypt and Sudan. Not much better, but at least it's somehow better. But we will know now from Ms. Yus if the situation in Tunisia and Morocco is similar to Sudan and Egypt, or there is something different. Ms. Yus Jouini is the director and lead researcher at Technoloxia Group. She works. Her works focus on the intersection between technology, media, and society. She is also the host of Digitally Youth podcast, which specializes in digital rights in North Africa. In 2020, she was built on the Limpian Prize of Freedom of Expression. Previously, Ms. Youth was a fellow of both the African School Internet Governance, yes, African Seed, and the Middle East and adjoining countries school in internet governance. Okay, she holds a software engineering degree from Carthage University. Carthage University, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so it's over to you, Ms. Yos.
So hello everyone. Just to give you an overview, pretty much if we start with the situation in Tunisia, it drastically changed between pre-25th of July and post-25th of July 2021. So as you may have heard or may have followed, the Tunisian president suspended major parts of the constitution just a few days ago, and on the 25th of July, he in a way suspended, or let's call it freeze, the parliament. Now, the suspension of the major parts of the constitution does not include parts that are about freedoms and rights, which is very important. But at the same time, when you have an executive power that pretty much doubles all the powers, including the legislative, and also like the judicial power can be examine or like review the decisions in a way, in an indirect way, you are given the freedoms. Now, people in Tunisia are pretty much there is two opinions. The first one is pretty much that this is the end of the transitional democracy in Tunisia since 2011, and other people are like more of the opinion that this is probably more of the putting democracy back on track. So this is pretty much the overview situation now, but you may, as Mohammed said, okay, in the last 10 years, even though Tunisia was in West called like free in general, like the full scope, but when it comes to internet freedom, it was still partly free. Why? Well, because of the laws in Tunisia and because of the absence of the reform of those laws. So whether it's like those laws were applied and used or whether they were not, they always existed since the pre-2011 events and protests. And what happened is that we'll go through a period where maybe the prime minister and like the ministers and the officials won't use those laws to limit freedoms. But in other cases, we ended up finding that those laws were used. Just to give you an overview on the legal framework in Tunisia when it comes to freedom of expression, for example. So we have the Code of Telecommunication, which is very similar to what I was saying. It's very vague and in a way allows the bloggers and anyone who uses technology or telecommunication means to transfer or publish opinions to be easily prosecuted. And it's not just the telecommunication code, we speak also of the penal code of Tunisia, because there is a very controversial point, which is like the public officials being in a way attacked or insulted. So this is also very broad. And then we can go further and find that even military court can prosecute or like charge citizens that are not in the military, like and pretty much restrict their freedoms. And we saw those cases. Now, what happened is that since 2011, the parliamentarians, the politicians in Tunisia were not very keen to reform actually those laws. We faced a few phases where this law was used by the government to actually prosecute protests, but also we had a phase where, for example, in 2020, just before the pandemic and during the pandemic, this law was used by local officials. So we are not speaking of the prime minister, the ministers, etc., and the high ranks of the government, but we're speaking of the police sheriff, for example, or for in small village, you find that the public official will prosecute certain people for their online activities. So you see that what happens when you have a legal framework with so many shortcomings when it comes to freedom of expression and digital rights of the citizens, you end up pretty much being at the mercy of the government, the officials, whether they use these laws or not. And what we saw also, like in the last couple of months with the changes I spoke of at the beginning, is that we saw people from the parliament being prosecuted for their online activities, people facing military courts, but we also saw like everyday social media user for posting few things. And here the challenge is that there's so many big words, very similar to the, I think, to the Egyptian legislation, as I said, is that national security, the well-being, or like very, very broad terms, and you end up in a way restricting, or if the person is not very aware of being very, very attentive to what they are publishing, they may end up being easily prosecuted. I remember I was working on a few research projects, and I was interviewing people that had been prosecuted in Tunisia. And the thing is that what I've constantly been hearing is that you end up with a group of the society not being accountable, and in a way they are allowed to do everything. and in this case, I'm specifically speaking of the police unions and their related pages online on Facebook, on other social media, and they pretty much would infringe the privacy of other people and posting their related information. We saw that people, and mainly women, have been doxxed on social media, which means that they had their residential information published on social media, that had their phone numbers, and have been intimidated and harassed on that way. We also speak that the LGBTQI plus community in Tunisia, for when they were like advocating against the law, the draft law actually didn't pass, that was speaking of the giving sort of immunity to the security forces. What ended up happening is that so many organizations documented cases of those activists being prosecuted and having the information shared on social media, being harassed. We ended up finding some actually went to the exile and left the country by choice, because not really by choice, because they were so much intimidations and harassment, and they were fearing on their physical safety. So it's not very, very bright, I would say, even though that, yes, if we compare to other countries, the situation in Tunisia till now is not that, is not very similar, but at the same time, as I said, when you have pretty much the ground to allow prosecutions and give the opportunity or the chance to anyone who would be head of the state to actually use those laws against internet freedoms. Now, the case in other countries is more, I would say, darker, because, for example, in Morocco, it's not only there are so many similarities when it comes to the law, but it's also about the resources that are actually deployed for the surveillance, for example. It reminds me a lot of Tunisia pre-2011, but at the same time, it's way more, because we are seeing governments actually buying surveillance tools to not only harass, but also actually survey and keep track of the activities of the journalists, Facebook or YouTube bloggers, and we end up at some point not feeling safe at all. If I just try to list or mention a few of the cases that were highlighted and documented in Morocco, for instance, we can pass at least 15 minutes just by mentioning a few cases. And this is very worrying, because it's not just the citizens in the country, but also we saw cases of people from diaspora, actually Moroccans living abroad, and they ended up, once they fly back to their country, being prosecuted for posting a YouTube video. We saw that a lot. But also, it's not only national security and what we used to see now, it's more also very similar to what you, Mohammed, have been saying about what we call fake news or misinformation and how that is being used. So to go back to Tunisia, for example, a draft bill at that time was in 2020 was actually proposed by the parliamentarian member, and the draft bill ended up being very restricting of freedoms, and pretty much wherever you post, if you don't have a list of evidence and facts, you ended up being prosecuted. Now, thanks to the civil society in Tunisia, that draft bill did not pass. But we saw in other countries similar cases. In Tunisia, on the other hand, we had a ministerial order by the health minister where he actually warned, or it's a sort of warning, let's say, or ordered the health workers to not contact the media or post on their social media anything related to the health situation in the country. It was a very, very controversial ministerial order. I'm not sure if it ended up being actually used, or let's say people, but it's the existence of it, and the fact that it was published in itself intimidates so many people. And again, that was also the case, for example, in Morocco, at the very beginning of the pandemic, we saw one YouTuber being arrested. And some people would end up saying like, okay, but if they are publishing false information and like saying, oh, there's no pandemic, it's not true or anything similar, maybe we should prosecute them. The problem is that do you provide enough safeguards that they can defend themselves and that those laws are not being used to actually prosecute anyone or any person that shares their opinion. So yes, on a way, we are facing challenges when it comes to false information and how they are being shared, and that it could have major problem or like consequences on the people. But also, are we not just focused on them just to be one more excuse to limit rights and limit freedoms? So I tried to give you an overview on the situation, but between Morocco and Tunisia. But if we look into the other countries, like for example Libya, like just to have an overview on the situation. Now the situation in Libya is supposed to go to a better road, but at the same time there's so many. It's so fragile that they end up being like not only persecuted by the government, but also risking your physical security, and that was the case of many activists actually. Speaking of that we are going to an election, and how important is it to actually be able to say what we think of and our opinions if we really wanted to have to build a strong democracy. Similarly, to Morocco, in Algeria, we are seeing so much crackdown on journalists. Anyone who works actually or tries to make an investigation or reports something different from the public narrative, they end up very easily being prosecuted and charged. So yeah, this is an overview. And if you have any questions or our audience have any questions, I will be happy to answer.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question for both of you. I know yes, you are engineering, not a lawyer, but you speak a lot about the law. So sorry, I have to ask this question. I want to ask about what's the rule from your point of view? What's the rule of the national courts so in the elimination the abuse of digital rights of course in Tunisia, Morocco, in Egypt, or also if you have idea about the other countries in the region, I think you can give us more details, because I think that the role of courts it's very important to as a tool of human rights defenders that could use to fight with the other abuse come from the government, if we speak about the government.
So this is very important because the interpretation of the law is very important when it comes to like in the courts. There is one example that was very actually interesting one. It happened in Tunisia in late 2020, where actually one judge interpreted the when it comes to in relation to like insulting public officials and its relation with freedoms. One judge had made a decision actually to not there were 3 or 2 internet users that actually shared their opinions online, and it's very, very not I would say rare, but it's very promising, because you can be very lazy and just like use what other people have been using, and the easy or mostly known sentences to actually, okay, someone who may be used to word that could be an insult to in their posts, online posts, they can easily face like charges with fines, but also very harsh imprisonment sentences. And we saw that those cases. We saw when it comes to people actually publishing a meme, which like making a joke like a sarcastic joke when it comes to the president, but also the huge problem or the huge sensitivity of religion in our countries. You can easily be charged, like we saw a 6-month sentence of prison in one case of nationality, and we saw other cases where people have been prosecuted for making a joke online, for posting very a meme, or like being sarcastic in a way. And in that case, it's very easy for the public opinion when it comes, like, for example, to religion or like to popular official, to actually have public opinion in a way on the side to prosecute and to charge people, and they would praise you for that. But here the problem is not only that you are like putting sentences and like charging people, but it's also like you are in a way making a first, or like going on a path that could be actually copied afterwards. So we saw like very lazy, I would say, sentences of just using one sentence in the article accessing the telecommunication code, for example, in Tunisia, just that if anyone that insults other people, insults, again, what do we mean by insult? Other people on a telecommunication means ends up being prosecuted and can face harsh sentences. But also we saw few cases, not many, of judges going beyond that and thinking of actually what do we mean by freedom of expression online, to which extent we can accept, to which extent we also protect other people from being insulted or having their online or they having their personal information being shared. Just another point is that it's very challenging that we end up seeing sort of immunity to certain people, and that those laws are being used just to, let's say, the weak bottle in the, or the weak circle in the whole chain, which is usually bloggers and internet users that don't have so much protection, or way are not very well connected and can make their cases very well known. We saw that in like people from rural places in Tunisia being prosecuted by the police officer, for example, from that region, but they end up, they can't actually, their cases won't be so much on the media, etc., because it's in a small town and no one actually pretty much unfortunately cares. So yeah, we saw it all. We saw people making the effort, but we also saw people using lazy sentences and just not making enough effort.
Thanks, Yos, for your information this about this issue, because as a lawyer, I think it is very important to check what is the rule of the course, because I think this is the last resort of the human rights defense to go to the courts. Of course, I know that Tunisia have a good practice in using the courts, especially in the field of human rights or human rights. And also, I'm sure that Aya has more information about the role of courts in Egypt, especially to challenge the decisions come whether to surveillance or the decision of internet shutdown. So I'm sure I have more information to share with us. So please go ahead, Aya.
You're the experts here, but so also please feel free to leave your moderator.
I will assist you.
Actually, why don't you go ahead, and then if something else comes to mind, I'll add to it.
So okay, so I answer this question. So let me start by Sudan, because also as just mentioned about the situation in using the national courts to challenge the different orders or decisions in about the internet surveillance or internet shutdown, or also about fake news. Sudan, which one case from my information, one case against the Zain company, after 2019 revolution. Because after the revolution and the political situation in Sudan, the Zain has cut the internet in Sudan, and one of the Sudanese lawyers had bring the case up for the courts, and the courts in the end has decided to or forced the company to pay the compensation to this lawyer for this because for for its illegal action for illegal action to cut the internet in Sudan. Egypt. Okay, if we come to Egypt, I think we have both. We have a good practice and we have a bad practice in Egypt. Of course, if we speak about the digital rights in Egypt, many of lawyers and human rights defenders have brought many cases before the Egyptian courts, especially the council, state council. Let me to reflect on two cases or three cases. One, the most famous case is the case of internet shutdown during 2011, the revolution. Actually, we have to conduct court decision. One comes from the administrative court, the first stage, the court of the first stage. The court, of course, has decided to force the Mubarak regime to compensate or pay the compensation for the personal harm from the internet shutdown. But this is not the point. The point is in this decision, the judge tried to put the definition for the national security. I think it's one of the remarkable court decision. This one, because the first I said from my information, this is the first court decision I tried to put the definition, especially, and he considers the situation that happened during the revolution is not constitute harm of national security. So I think it's one of the good point for this. After that, the Egyptian government has challenged this first stage decision, and the case has moved to the higher court, the high administrative court. High administrative court has cancelled the first one. This is not a problem. It always happens, but also what's the important issue, the high administrative court has replied on this argument in the decision, and also it starts to define what's the meaning of national security. So I think this, the courts in Egypt play a very good rule to challenge the digital rights abuses. And also we have another cases about the freedom of expression. Maybe some like, I think I know that Muqtada Mansour has brought many cases before the courts to close some newspapers that attack him or assault him. But these cases, the court or the court has decided to not respond to the case or dismiss the case, and constitute that if I close this newspaper or this TV channel, that this constitute abuse for the freedom of expression and freedom of opinion. Also, I think also I know that the Constitutional Court in Egypt also has or play a very good and important role, especially in the field of human rights, and we have many decisions that it's always upholds the human rights, especially digital human rights in Egypt. So I think it's very important. And as we can say from the presentation from Yusr in Morocco and Tunisia, and also I want to speak about about Egypt and also in Sudan, what the similar issue that all the countries in the region, not only these countries have presented today, but also the other countries like in Algeria, Mauritania, Libya, all these countries start to use the law as a tools to close the civic space. So if the governments in these countries start to use this technique. I prefer to mention it, or call it as technique to close the civic space legally. So I think the course or the role of the national course will be the most important weapon. I think it's a weapon to face these tools or using these tools. We can change the laws if we speak about the rules come. Yeah, for example, it's or the situation in the North Africa. Let me say that the rule of the strategic litigation is now is very important, and I think the lawyers and human rights defenders have to focus in using the courts to change the laws and the policies in the practice. And we have experiences from Tunisia, from Egypt, and also from Sudan, which tell us that okay, using the courts to change the policies or to at least eliminate the abuse of digital rights, it's applicable. It's not something is not impossible, but we need to focus and work more on this about the rule of digital rights. And as you see that all the countries is in the region have the same and have the same challenges, and we have the same gaps. The last thing I would like to say, as we see that in the past, before 2010, all the countries, maybe Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, Mauritania, Libya, we all were suffering from to define the national security only. All the people, all the citizens in these countries asking what's the meaning of national security, especially when the journalist or human rights defenders subject to arrest because they harm the national security. But now, the situation now, after all these countries have adopting the cyber crimes law, we have another definition. Not only now we're not asking about what's the meaning of national security, but now we are asking what's the meaning of the value of Egyptian family or Sudanese family. What's the meaning of assault the religious figures? What's the type of assault? What's the act constitute as assault for the religious figures? Also, we start also to add another very vague definitions to we have to work on. So the situation in the region is not promised, I think, and we need to work more on this. I think now I will pass the floor to the princess for the closing or the closing statement, or if you would like to say the last word with the participant. After that, we will open the floor for participation for any question or comments for the panelists or in general. So we can start with Aya. If you the last word for this presentation.
Thank you, Mohammed. So yeah, I think the only one thing that I add that that perhaps is not pertaining to a law in particular was when we had the Muhammad Ali protests a couple of years ago. The Egyptian authorities tried to monitor Facebook mostly, but probably other social media platforms on the passersby in the street. And so people started deleting their apps, leaving their phones behind, having different phones. And so I think they wanted to sustain that, but they couldn't. But this is just to give an overview of how much there is an attempt to do basically a crackdown or even the monitoring of not just social media. We'd like to think of it as access of information, and as we've seen in our my colleague's presentation, Yusr and Muhammad, this is not, unfortunately, not particular to Egypt, but mostly in North Africa, the situation is very similar with small variances. So we continue to monitor the situation and hope for more freedoms.
Yes.
Yeah, I won't add much to what I said when it comes to freedoms and digital rights in the North African region. But maybe one remark is that what we used to face actually as what we call, in a way, traditional, because that's what we have been facing for over 10 years, is that now there is growing concern of using actually more sophisticated tools and more sophisticated technology to hinder and pretty much limit anything related to freedoms and the possibility to actually share one's opinion, whether it goes to the use of spyware tools and like tracking activists and human rights defenders, but it also goes to other issues related, for example, of facial recognition and having CCTV cameras everywhere in our streets, and how transparent are our institutions and governments with the people, and how are we able to actually use and maybe discuss the use and the accountability of purchasing, but also putting in place those softwares. Maybe just a brief thing is that we, when we speak also of digital rights, we speak of data protection, we speak of the right to privacy, and in our region, in a way, I'd say compared to the whole African continent, they were pretty much the first to actually establish those data protection laws, etc. But then you end up with, after a couple of years, you end up with laws that are, in a way, very restrictive, but also that are very vague and don't acknowledge the new technologies we are using. We see a little bit of hope, and let's say we keep on monitoring those cases, but also, for example, we see that in the Commission of Data Protection in Morocco, in a way, put a memorandum on the use of facial recognition during the pandemic, and then review it to actually give it to certain financial institutions and social institutions. And here comes the importance of, because when we say we speak about freedoms and digital rights, it's also because we want to be able to actually express our concerns and express our opinions when it comes to other issues that may be related to more emerging technologies. And here comes also the importance of having our commissions actually being independent, which is unfortunately not the case in most countries. Or if it's the case, you end up with being under-financed and in a way being not having the resources to actually pursue their missions in a way that protects the freedoms and the digital rights of the citizens. So it's very easy to actually, in Tunisia, we have the joke that we have the best constitution in the world, but if you don't put the appropriate legal framework and appropriate safeguards and review what you have actually in place already, and make sure that if you go with the right intentions to actually put things into place that protects citizens, you won't be thinking that you will last in the power forever, because if you don't review today when you are in power, maybe the other day, in a few years, you will be out of that power and you will become, in the way, the victim. And if there is like one case we can highlight in that case, it's the case of Tunisia, because for years we've been calling for the reform of the legal framework and to put in place constitutional court that would make sure that you actually put in place the right safeguards for the constitution. But because for 10 years that was not happening, you end up today with so much risks and pretty much only hoping for the best from the ruler. So yeah, it's very, we can take it very pessimistically, but on the same way, it's very important to document and to see the broader vision. And yeah.
Thank you. As you mentioned, I think the most important thing that's common in our region now. Most of the countries in the region, Egypt, if you speak about Egypt and Tunisia, and also Morocco, Algeria, or Mauritania, all of these countries has a very good constitution, and all these constitutions respect the right to privacy and respect the freedom of expression and opinion and perhaps surveillance and everything. And also, most of these countries are party in international human rights instrument. But when we come to the laws, the national laws, we see something different. And even if the national laws also respect this or manage perhaps to be honest, if we speak about the cybercrime law and please, Aya, correct me if I'm wrong. If we speak about the cybercrime law in Egypt, it's asked or perhaps it's a surveillance, and also we put the or not but they oblige that the authorities to submit the like the request to the court to take the permission before they take the action. But but we have emergency law still. If we speak about Sudan, Sudan is the same. So there is law also is prohibiting surveillance and also ask it to take the permission in advance. But they have a national security law. So this is one of most common issue in region, and but also I think it's situation not in digital. We cannot speak about the digital right away from the general situation of human rights, not about the digital or online, but also the situation. And regardless from my point of view, and regardless about what is about human rights, but we have a real concern and issue about the human rights in the region. It's very complicated issue. Not from like away from the human rights perspective, but if we speak about from the political issue, we have a real problem in the region, not related to not. We cannot say that because, to be honest, we are trying 13, 14 years, 40 years ago to have a human rights, but until now we cannot. And we have many people who try to work in this to reform the situation of human rights in the region, but we not in the north also in MENA. If we speak about in MENA also, no country is classified as free country. So I think the problem is not only related to if the governments or the authorities would like to apply to respect human rights or not. They have will to respect human rights or not. They would like to stay in the regime or not. I think that the situation or the issue is more is complicated and is only not related to the one regime, because we are 22 countries in the MENA and no one qualifies as a free country. So even if the private country as Tunisia is now, or not now, but we say now some changes, and we cannot, yes, we cannot say that Tunisia is the free now, because there is some practice on the ground. Let us say that no, Tunisia, like Egypt, like Morocco, like Algeria, you have some yes, but you have some there is a difference between the countries. Maybe in Tunisia, the human rights or the people in citizens in Tunisia enjoy human rights more in more Egypt. Maybe the people in Egypt enjoy the human rights more the people in Sudan or in Mauritania. But by the end, all of us we don't enjoy the complete human rights as mentioned in the international human rights instrument. So I think we need to. Last question, because of course, if any one of the participants have any comments or question, he can pass the question through the Q&A icon. But if not, so I can ask us last question for your post also. What I observed is that why or what's the reason from your point of view, as I mentioned in the beginning, that Tunisia is ranked as one of the free countries when you speak about the human rights in general. But when we come to the digital or freedom of internet, the situation is changing and it's quite not free. of course, Egypt is not free in both. Sudan is the same in both. Libya is the same in both. Morocco is partially in human rights in general, and free, as far as free in terms of human rights in general. But when it comes to digital rights, it's not. Mauritania also is classified as partial free in human rights in general, but when it comes to the digital rights, it's not. So, from your point of view, why this change? And let me just say that if the Tunisia is respects the human rights in general, so I think that it's normal to respect the digital rights because it's both. The human rights is the human rights. Physically is human rights, on the ground human rights, online is human rights. So why this change from your point of view? Yes, you can guide.
Yeah. So it's very we can go back to the technical debate when it comes to why actually even pre 25th of July events, Tunisia was still having challenges when it comes to digital rights, even compared to internal human rights. In a way, because as I said, like the legal framework was actually the same pretty much from the ones during the dictatorship, the US dictatorship pre-2011. But also in a way because I like to say that technology in a way amplifies few challenges. We say it a lot about emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, etc. But also when it comes to like the telecommunication means, and we saw that social media pretty much gave people the platform to express more freely and like post like usually before a person that would need to go actually to the newspaper to publish an opinion piece. Now it's no longer the case, and just in your from the comfort of your sofa you can do that. But yes, in general, when you put like safeguards for human rights, you end up with having stronger digital rights. But if you leave certain vagueness in the law, if you leave a certain an absence, I would say, in accountability, you end up restriction of freedoms, whether in courts, but also like with what we call the general atmosphere. Just like in early January 2021, it was the 10th anniversary of the Tunisian Revolution, and we saw an immersive crackdown on the protests. They were pretty much at the beginning social protests, like related to the social economy and economic situation in the country. But because protesters were using online tools to document the abuse and the repressive use and unjustified, I would say, use of force by the police, etc. They ended up being actually prosecuted for that. We also even saw cases where a person would be like passing near a protest, and they end up like arresting the person and just like taking their phone, actually, which is very illegal if you're not doing it like with warrants and have a judicial warrant, etc. We saw another, I would say, another extent when like police forces and security would actually use their own personal profiles to actually share information that is confidential about. In a very terrific incident, we saw a case where a woman activist ended up having her home address being shared on social media. Her kids' kindergarten address was shared on Facebook as well. And it was terrifying because you see the extent of abuse of power and how much, not only like when it comes to the physical security, but also like the emotional abuse, the and the repercussions on that, on the mental help of activists and human rights defenders. So yeah, it's like a whole package, but also if we go deeper into technicalities, we can see why we are facing so many particular challenges. I think with technology that it's evolving, and in a way also our society and its use of technology is evolving. And if you don't pursue or like be attentive to that those evolution and how fast things could change, and how fast simple things could be used, you end up in a way having archaic legal frameworks that are not updated and adapted to our age.
I'll also like just add a little bit to Yusra, like she was saying about sorry, just blanked here. Other platforms. So here, like all right. So we're talking about access and the ability to give oversight. So I think before 2011, basically the social media aspect, or at least the internet space, was viewed as a relatively harmless platform. That also, different platforms have different levels of access. Like Twitter is usually for the elite, or like not widely spread. So like it's they're just platforms that people can use to waste time, or just like for entertainment. But after the Arab Spring, authorities, I feel like they've regretted that, and they felt it like a tool, a dangerous tool, because of also like their lack of oversight and their lack of reach. As she was saying, like in newspapers, you can review like the editorial board. You can see who's in place, but you can't regulate social media in that sense. And that's why they've been trying to find ways, like the other law, I think it's the media law, Muhammad, that says like any person who has 5,000 or more followers, they're regarded as a media platform, and then like they would be evaluated for the news they for whatever information they give, if it's classified as fake news or what, and that's the means of controlling them. So I think it's the idea of unprecedented access of people to the public and to the world, and then also like to the outside of the country itself, like before you had to travel, but now you have access to foreign. They're always afraid, of course, of foreign interventions, of foreign governments, of foreign nationals, and so you have that access. And so like which is very scary to them. But also, for example, the ability to make money, which has been kind of an aspect in TikTok, with women making or girls making lots of money that the government cannot regulate. And so there's the idea of the regulation, but also of like how do you contain it? How can you prevent it? How can you prevent the internet or the digital space from becoming a tool against you, especially politically, and overthrow you? But how can you control it when there aren't like officials that you can place or people that you can remove, that everyone, basically all you need is a laptop or an iPhone to access it?
Yes, you would like to add something?
No, pretty much it's that idea of on one hand, it's all about the narrative, the public narrative. We saw people like, even Tunisia, when the July 25th events, we saw like people were trying to shape actually their own narrative and how they saw things. That in that way was like, you can expect it to go both ways, but at the same time, it's the ability to actually contribute to the narrative and not just having the state tell the story the way it is. We saw it with the pandemic, and it was also a narrative on how the health situation is and how it's being handled. I think it all revolves on that. It revolves on the public narrative. Also in Morocco, when we saw the people from the diaspora and actually Moroccans living abroad being prosecuted, etc., it was because they are starting to express their criticism more freely in a way, but also shaping or maybe pretty much making noise around, okay, this is not okay, this is not how things should be, or maybe let's just express how we view things. Definitely technology gave us the possibility to make that possible, and to actually to be able to express how we see things, even if we're not at the top or the head of the government, or even if we're not in a way have the whole support of the media, etc. So yeah, it's definitely interesting and challenging times, with both opportunities but also obstacles, and the fight, I would say, between which way we go. We go more into restrictions, or we go into more freedoms, and how at the same time we still protect people from being harassed and intimidated on social media.
Yes, I agree with you, and I think because upon what you mentioned, that the fake news or disinformation becomes a ready crime that is ready in the hand of the governments to counter these freedoms in online, because everything what you can say whatever you want to do to say, or online in your posts or comments or something, but they also have a right to challenge this or to fight this by using the fake news. And we can back also for the problem of the definitions in the sphere or the terms of the digital rights. And I think one of our most problem, not the legislations or the tools, but the definitions. If we have, if Tunisia or Egypt, anywhere in the region, if we have clear definition, I think it will be assist to eliminate the abuse of digital rights. So if we have a clear definition for the national security, the value of family values, and fake news, or what's the criteria, what's the elements, what is considered fake news or disinformation, and what is considered a right to criticize, what is all these things. I think if we have this, I think we will solve the most of the problems. And also, if we have a real legal review from the independent institution, especially it should be judicially institution, I think it will be also will be good. And I think from my point of view, we have the basics to solve this problem in the region. We have institution, as you mentioned in your presentation. We have international human rights instrument we can use. Also, we have we have independent courts, so we can rely on. So I think we have some basic, at least, courts in Tunisia, Egypt, Sudan also have, and Morocco, I think Algeria also. So, and also Mauritania. So I think we have a basics to challenge, not to challenge, but to solve the problem, to fill the gaps. But I think we still need work together and work more. And one of the problem, not in the digital rights, but in everything. I think I think that, or I say that if we speak about the levels, the NGOs, every NGOs would like to work lonely, and they isolate from other organization or other activities. I think we need to gather all these efforts and to do one effort against this practice. If all of, not in Egypt, and not speak about like the organization or activities in Egypt, not in Egypt, but the activities in the region. We have, I think it's good time to we can to start to think about the network for North Africa, because I don't know, we have a network in North Africa. We have a digital rights network in Africa. We have many in Africa. We have many in Africa. I'm not speaking about one organization or one network, but we have many. Yani, for me myself, I'm a member for 2 or 3 in Africa, but yani, North Africa, we have nothing from, as I know. So I think this is the time to start to think to establish a North Africa digital rights network. So I think I can start to think about this, and yours, and we can plan to do that, and we can ask the other to invite other activists, of course, from the North Africa to do more. And also, I think one of the important issues we have to work on to raise the awareness of the person, of the human rights activists or the lawyers in the region to work on the digital rights, because if we speak about the digital rights in the region, I think not all the person, lawyers, or even if the human rights defenders have a knowledge about what is the digital rights and what is the component of the digital rights, because the digital rights is not only like using the Facebook and post and say what you want to say in Facebook or Twitter, but I think the digital rights is more broad. We speak about digital rights. We speak about the access to internet. We speak about the data protection. We speak about the surveillance. We speak about fake news. We speak about, but so I think we need to do something in the level of the capacity building in the region. So thank you, Aya. Thank you for you joining this session or accepting from the beginning to join this session. And also, Aya is not accepting, but she is like part of this session or one of the main organizers of this session. Thank you, Aya. Thank you, Os. I'm happy to be with you today, and I think your presentations, from my I learn more and more from your presentation, and thank you for all of you, and thank you for the interpreters and the CPESA and the organizers. And see you in another session. Thank you. So I think now we are on time, so we have to close this session. And bye bye.
Bye.